Iran and Russia are set to conduct joint naval drills in the Sea of Oman and northern Indian Ocean. The drills, part of a long-standing maritime security belt series, aim to improve cooperation between the two nations to counter maritime security threats and combat maritime terrorism. Iranian Navy Commander Hassan Magaduslo has stated that the drills could focus on coordinating in addressing security challenges. This exercise reflects a deepening military partnership between Tehran and Moscow, especially amid growing geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. The drills come after Iran's Revolutionary Guards conducted military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz earlier this week, a crucial global shipping route for oil exports. Analysts see this growing military cooperation as part of a broader strategic alignment between Russia and Iran, both of whom seek to challenge Western influence in the region and assert control over key maritime trade routes. We are now being joined again by Dr. Gilbert. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. What strategic message are Iran and Russia sending by conducting coordinated naval drills in the Sea of Oman and northern Indian Ocean? And how might this influence regional security dynamics?
I think that these naval exercises were scheduled long in advance of the present crisis in the Middle East. But they're being used to bear on that crisis. After all, the United States has its single aircraft carrier task force in place, is bringing a second task force in place, a second aircraft carrier, all to exert enormous pressure on Iran for the sake of the negotiations that are proceeding with respect to uranium enrichment and, if the United States hopes, to other issues on its agenda, which otherwise the Iranians reject. Nonetheless, the key issue is the enrichment, and that is under negotiation, and America is trying to influence it by its show of strength. The Russian presence there is symbolic, but it bears not only on it bears less on the reality of the negotiating situation with respect to Iran than it bears on the negotiating situation with respect to Ukraine. You'll have to note that both negotiations over Iran and over Ukraine were taking place in Geneva yesterday with the same American negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner. That's not an accident. These two crises and negotiations are interrelated. It is fairly clear to me, at least, that Mr. Putin threatened Trump. This goes back a week and a half ago, that if you proceed with an attack on Iran, then there will be no further negotiations over Ukraine. So from the Russian standpoint, the issues are intimately linked. The real backer of Iran in the crisis, of course, is not Russia. It is China. China has, in the past few months, supplied Iran with an ecosystem of detection, the world's most unique radars that look over the horizon to 700 kilometers and can detect America's special aircraft that are supposedly invisible to radar. This plus satellite imagery and satellite tracking of American military assets in the waters of the Middle East are invaluable for Iran's defense. But China has a much bigger interest in Iran staying whole and safe than Russia does. The Chinese receive 1.4 million barrels of oil a day from Iran, which is critical to the functioning of the Chinese economy. Therefore, it is understandable that the Chinese have put up much more military support for Iran than Russia has.
And how do these joint naval exercises reflect broader trends in military cooperation between Moscow and Tehran, and what implications might this have for global power balances? Also, could this be involving China and other regional actors?
Well, in general, China has brought its naval assets into the region, including a special equipped ship that is equivalent to American air surveillance of the region. This provides Iran with very effective, usable, real-time information for targeting American naval vessels that are in movement in the region. So, as I say, the Chinese, in terms of military assistance, are a far bigger factor. Nonetheless, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians all are supposed to be participating in various naval exercises during this time period. As to the level of alliance, the Russians have no military pact with Iran. This is all being arranged on an impromptu ad hoc basis because the two parties decided it was safer not to have such a military alliance in place, going back to December, January, when the Iranians of the incoming Trump administration still had the illusion, hope, that a deal could be reached with Trump and the sanctions would be lifted on Iran, which was a much greater reward than anything that the Russians could give them. That, of course, fell away. We know that Mr. Trump came in threatening Iran, attacking Iran, and it's taken a while for the sides to come back together at the negotiating table. But still, the Russians do not have a military alliance with Iran. They will not have, obviously. The Chinese, neither do the Chinese. But de facto, as I say, for the reasons of China's dependence on Iranian oil, the Chinese are giving very substantial military assistance to Iran, which makes an American attack unlikely, if almost one could say impossible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gilbert, Dr. O, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It was lovely speaking to you. Australia has announced it will temporarily ban one of its citizens held in a Syrian camp from returning home. This decision comes under rarely used powers aimed at preventing potential terror activity. 34 Australians, including children, are held in the northern Syrian facility, many linked to families of suspected Islamic State terrorists. Authorities say some were briefly freed but turned back by Damascus over inadequate paperwork. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke confirmed one individual received a temporary exclusion order based on security advice. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said some members had aligned with a brutal ideology, but children are not responsible for their parents' actions. The potential return has sparked debate in Australia as support for the right-wing One Nation party hits record levels. The government continues to assess security risks before allowing anyone else to return. We are now being joined by retired Major General Gigi Davidi, who is a war veteran and professor of international relations and strategic studies, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. So, how does Australia balance national security concerns with its legal obligation to allow citizens to return to their home country?
Well, Ellie, it's always a challenge because national security is very paramount, and especially, over the last couple of months, there have been a number of cases in Australia, and one was the recent one in Sydney, where the father-son duo had, caused a couple of casualties with their firearms, and the son had a record of links with certain terrorist organizations. So to that extent, I think the government had enacted a law in 2019, which has the legal, provisions to bar people who have suspected or doubtful record. And now this is exactly the case which is now being applied for people who are in custody in Syria who have links with ISIS. But ironically, even the children are affected, and rightly so when the Prime Minister Albanese said that how can you blame children for the acts of their parents or their guardians? So therefore, I think Australia has to balance it out, and they have to deal case by case because it cannot be dealt across the board. They have to see case by case and see how each case actually is to be handled. And of course, the law is there, but law cannot be applied across the spectrum. So I'm sure the security agencies will take a call and see each case how it is to be handled. And now in this case, they have actually stopped the entry of one of these persons who is held up there. And there are, as I said, 34 of them. So they'll have to be dealt case by case. But nonetheless, the national security very paramount, and especially so when Australia had number of cases of shooting and terrorist-related violence. Ali.
And what are the ethical and humanitarian implications of banning someone? Like you said, these are children. So they're banning women and children from returning home, especially when they are in these big conflict zones like Syrian detention camps.
Absolutely, Ali, because human rights always clash when the security is concerned, and many times it is the children or some relatives who are not connected with the, either the people who are suspected or who are involved in such cases. But then again, one has to take a call case by case because after all, the children are vulnerable and they are dependent upon their parents. And if they are, either they are held back or they are not allowed to join in, then it also comes the concern as to who will look after them. So this is a very delicate and sensitive issue. This has to be handled both through the legal means and also through the compassion, through the empathy. Now that's where the line has to be drawn because many a times you have to circumvent the legal issues on the ethical grounds, and ethical issues have to be many a time seen from the prism of security. So I think this is a very sensitive issue. It has to be tackled case by case, and more than that, I think empathic or at least the compassionate, concern must be given in, or at least must be taken care of, because law cannot be stringently applied, and there's always a human angle to it. And in this case too, I think this has to be seen both from the legal and also from the humanitarian perspective. Ali.
Thank you, but please don't go too far as I will be joining back with you very shortly. US Vice President James David Vance has said that he worries